and remember what is in it. But that would be extreme. So anyway, a call this morning from Knezovich, which I'll return his voicemail when we're done with this meeting. Nothing else, no emails, no phone calls. Karen, anything?
We're starting to get calls. We've had additional contact with the family and with some other people. Yeah, they're coming in already.
Some new information?
Yes.
Somebody affiliated with the hospital told me this morning I'm pushing on this issue of what happened when Yo was admitted and potential conflict within the hospital over what was going on. He tells me that incident reports would have been filed within the hospital bureaucracy and eventually to the state, but I would guess we don't have access to those incident reports.
HIPAA apparently applies even when people are dead.
Yeah. So I don't know that we'll ever get the paperwork that backs up some of those concerns, but they're out there if the source were able to provide them.
So is Ozzy saying now that they actually are training for excited to
What he said in his voicemail, and I have not called him back, so all I've got is his voicemail, is that his training officers are completing their training this week, and then, as we note in the story, that they'll begin training the deputies, I think he said June 1st. Yeah. I think what aggravates him is the line in the main bar drops the first shoe but doesn't drop the second. And I think if there is a point that he's trying to make that we could have put in the main bar where we make reference to the fact that there's a question, why didn't deputies receive excited delirium? We could have parenthetically said they're getting the training beginning next month. But I don't know if that would decide. I don't know. I haven't
just in
talked
time to help you out.
Well, story notes that the announcement was made after Yo was already dead.
Except for I thought they announced that a while ago that all the Spokane officers, all the sheriff's officers, or deputies.
I think it's the schedule that he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when it was going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, we quoted them as saying it's been in the works since last fall.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but the schedule was just announced. No complaints about the photo. Anybody hearing anything? Nothing from the hospital. Nothing from. Now again, I don't know if Sheriff Knezovich will have an alternative point of view.
Well,
I don't understand the concern about what the hospital would have to say about this, or even what the hospital could say if someone who is welcome into ICU to see a patient takes a picture of that patient. What say is it of the hospital?
Well, it's not a legal issue. It's that they're so intent on controlling information out of the hospital. My anticipation isn't that they would argue it was illegal or wrong in that way, but that it was a violation of the intent of their various policies to restrict that kind of information, not just out of the hospital, but out of ICU.
Well, I also think that it's related to HIPAA in that it has become so much easier for hospitals to deal with the media because all they have to do is say HIPAA. So their mindset is, we don't tell them nothing.
Yeah.
And
don't show them, don't tell them, don't
That's
talk.
right. We're a closed society. And if someone actually gets a photograph from one of our units, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end. I mean, I think they see it that starkly. So.
Well, on the other hand, we haven't heard from them this morning.
I know.
So maybe we're...
Well, and Dave pointed this out the other day, that if you have a baby, suddenly you're inundated with junk mail from people wanting to sell you things. So apparently the hospital is providing that information.
I have a beautiful picture of myself at Sacred Heart Hospital holding my new baby in 1973 in my room.
Well, there are lots of big differences there. I think as a new parent, we must have some new parents here somewhere. We're not all that old. Under HIPAA, you can put yourself on a do not contact list for the junk. And of course, you can take yourself off the list for having your birth announced in the newspaper, which in the 70s, every birth was announced. And it was up to I remember newspapers had a policy, I know at the Register Guard, we would not put in the birth for single mothers. It was just the paper's policy. If it was just the mom on the birth certificate, we wouldn't put them in the paper. But everybody got reported out of the hospital.
I realize this isn't the point of your story, but what was the rationale of that?
It was shameful.
Oh, I think that was pretty common.
Sure.
Not holding them up to ridicule.
Yeah, sure. Not identifying this poor child as a bastard. Yeah.
We did the same thing here.
Wow.
But yeah, that was newspapers did that unilaterally. The hospital was required to report all births and did so. And we were a newspaper of record. We all were. Not anymore. Anyway, HIPAA.
With the Yo case and with Patterson, the guy that was shot by the Spokane officer, both of those people were made confidential to the point where I called all the hospitals and they wouldn't tell me what condition they were in or anything. They wouldn't even confirm they were a patient.
So we can't even tell necessarily where these people are taken.
No, and we had already identified where like Patterson had been taken, and when I called the hospital and they said he's not a patient here, I said, well, I'm pretty sure that he is a patient. Had to call law enforcement, and they called and they were able to get it, but one agency can and the other agency can't. So with Yo, only Reagan can find out what condition he was in, and apparently, and I was talking to Jonelle about this. Law enforcement can make the patient confidential, which is really aggravating.
So deep six and even below HIPAA.
They gave me, I called the nursing supervisor at Sacred Heart on late Thursday and late Friday, and they gave me ongoing updates.
On Yo.
On Yo.
Oh, they did?
They did, so maybe they changed in the middle of the week or something.
Or maybe it just depends on who you talk to.
It might. But early on, well, nursing supervisor is different than I talked to the PIO.
Oh, I just don't know.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Got a problem solved.
Well, anyway, hell of a story this morning. Between that and Summer Phelps, are we the only people in the community who are outraged by these things? Are we so off base with everybody else? I mean, because we really don't hear.
Steve, I think, and at the risk of making one of those overly broad statements, I think you've had enough experience, I think, with the West coverage and those things. There is a deep and abiding sense in Spokane that if you've grown up here, one of your guiding principles is if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And both of these stories are in that category of you just can't say anything nice. And other than, I don't know, well, looks like those people, could use some help, or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit, but I mean, I've had to remind myself of that, and you see it time and time again.
Well, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars, countless reporter hours, countless editing hours, over and over again on these stories where we're butting up against official and unofficial secrecy. And we're outraged by it. And yet, a couple letters to the editor on the diocese package telling us, let sleeping dogs lie, leave it alone. No community outrage that's evident. Summer Phelps, no, outside of the fact that they want to hang the people who did it, no outrage over the secrecy.
I mean,
no outrage.
You need the privacy of a ballot box. I mean, remember all the angst over what was going to happen in that recall vote, and people are like, oh, it could go either way, and it's like, well, people didn't have to say anything. They just had to go and click.
I just wonder sometimes if we're watchdogging for people who don't want to be watchdogged.
I think there's a lot of quiet, at least on the child abuse series, a lot of quiet outrage on, from the people I know from my book group, as doctors and engineers, well-educated women in it, and they are just extremely impressed with what we did with that child abuse series. I don't think they wrote a letter to the editor about it, but they are very supportive of the paper nonetheless.
What do you think about this culture of secrecy, though? Do you think there's any kind of a common man, common woman sense of the culture of secrecy that surrounds so much of the rest of what we're dealing with? Whether it's Jack Lynch or priest abuse or West?
I don't know. I just don't know. I think people are uncomfortable. People are very busy. They're overwhelmed with their own lives. And I get a feeling that a lot of people are just retreating from the public sphere. They don't have time or the interest to deal with it. And they know that things are wrong up there, but they don't think that they can fix them. So it's troubling.
Yeah, I think that's a good part of there is the willingness to accept the secrecy here, and in a lot of communities, but it's that lack of civic engagement, I think, that we've seen for the last 20 years. And remember, an old saw in politics, voters vote their pocketbooks. And for the most part, a lot of what we're doing, they're not pocketbook issues.
Right. There's, on some of these issues on police oversight and the police issues, the community has responded. I mean, the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, the Jails Group, they had that whole series of very good forums at Gonzaga Law School. 200 people approximately attended every single one of them. And, eventually down the line, the mayor announces he wants an ombudsman for the city. So that might not have been as fast as we would have liked. We didn't have large crowds, gathering in the public squares demanding change, but the community did respond.
Is there any difference in Idaho? Is there widespread outrage about the emails over there?
No. The same thing.
I don't think Spokane's unique.
No, it's a general. I mean, people are less community focused and more focused on the individual. It's partially it's from what I've read, it's a generational thing. We see ourselves as a bunch of little individual fiefdoms rather than a neighborhood, and that's just how it is.
Well, I think there's also a general distrust of newspapers,
right.
media. People they doubt our motives, I think, on a lot of these things. And but as far as outrage, remember Otto Zim, it was like a ball rolling downhill. It took a long time for people to really get behind that. And I see this as being the same kind of thing. The more we uncover about it, the more we write about it, people are going to decide that this is outrageous. So
there is I think Gary alluded to sort of this lack of political empowerment too, and people don't feel like they can do anything, so they become sort of passive observers. I think they're outraged as much as we are, but they ask themselves, what the hell can I do about this? I can't go, fire these deputies. Writing a letter to the editor isn't going to do any good. So what can I do?
That's a good point.
Well, it is a good quote. What do you do if you're a citizen? What do you do?
Yeah, and that's to say, I don't think people realize that just by raising all these little individual voices, that collectively sends a message to the people in charge. And I don't know how we fix that. That's the challenge. That's the challenge we face. I think more than anything, more than technology or any of these other forces, that's the biggest problem newspapers face, is people don't see themselves as part of the community anymore.
And if you walk into any household in America right now and ask them to identify one issue that's on their mind, and I bet the most common thing would be the darn gasoline prices.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly, that's right.
Yeah, CPS is holding records that would have affected the price of gas, so people
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
There's no doubt about that.
And it's a pocketbook issue.
I do want to draw the distinction on the outrage I'm looking for. I'm not asking or seeking outrage on a particular incident. We don't know enough about the Yo case to know whether that's worth outrage or not. It's the culture of secrecy that outrages me. And our reaction to the culture of secrecy, the more they do it, the madder we get, and the more we push back on it, which costs us tens of thousands in legal fees and these hours and hours of journalism investment. And sometimes I just feel like we're boxing with a marshmallow. Stick our hand in, we pull it out, and the shape bounces right back.
I think that secrecy is just so common in this country now. I mean, on a federal level, it's just kind of like people are encouraged to accept it as a sign of patriotism, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I think that culture has been sort of cultivated over the last 6 or 7 years.
I mean, in Spokane, this goes way before George Bush or 9/11. I mean, it has always amazed me here, and this is an old song that everybody here has heard. It has amazed me here that what it takes for us to get police records, when in other police departments in the state, you can go in and sit down at a desk and flip through every police report from the previous day, that it seems to bother so few people that you can't do that in Spokane. It's always bothered me here that we do stories about illegal executive sessions, secret meetings, and the only ones who tend to get outraged are journalists, and people outside this room think it's just an issue for us. It's not an issue for them.
Yeah.
And that changed in the last 10, 12 years. I remember when I started and I was on night cops, we used to walk back into the public safety building and talk to everybody and knock on doors, and it changed at some point. I forget what, I think it was something we did that made it change, but we used to do that.
But the cops have always told us, if you want to see a police report, you have to know about the incident, you have to tell us when it happened, and then we'll take our own sweet time getting the document. That has not changed.
Well, we're about to fight another fight on the police records front. Knezevich is trying to put crime statistics for the department, including the Valley, online. And Mercier, the city manager in the Valley, is saying, no way are you going to put crime statistics for the city of the Valley online, and they're fighting about that right now. We have to catch up with that. And let me pass on, I had an hour-long meeting with Sean Cross the other day, who was concerned about our coverage of Payne Hamlin last week. And, you know, much of it was just Sean and I coming to a mutual agreement to disagree on so much of what we've written and they've done. But he made one reference here. This will appall you. And well, it appalled me. Maybe it won't appall you. We were talking about the alternatives to the agreement, and he said this agreement only works in a black box. The gears that drive the settlement only work if they're contained in a black box, and the minute you open the box, the gears are going to grind to a halt and the settlement will die. And he said, what was the alternative? And the alternative, of course, is that these cases be adjudicated in a court of law before a judge and jury, you know, some dozens of cases. And he said, well, that would have destroyed this community, because over the course of those lawsuits, you would have found out the victims, the abusers, the people who abetted the abusers, the people who knew about it and did nothing, the public officials who knew about it and did nothing, and that would destroy this community. And therein lies a rationale for keeping things secret.
Unbelievable.
There's an issue. I mean, I guess to continue on the deep thoughts tangent. I think the way you
Deep thoughts
to go through this. One of the things you learn as a journalist, I mean, everybody says they want the truth. One of the things you learn very quickly as a journalist, and I suspect in many other quarters, is that the truth is seldom pretty. And I think where some people will go down one road and journalists go down the other is the journalist believes that regardless of how pretty or unpretty the truth may be, the truth is still important. And Sean Cross obviously is now the poster child of that other fork in the road, that at some point the truth is so ugly you just cover it up.
It's destructive.
And
Jack Nicholson said, "In A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth." Remember that?
And then these people are sitting there in judgment of what people can handle.
Right.
So I mean, it gets back to Ken's comment about fiefdoms and you know, trying to control it.
And within an institution like the Catholic Church, which at least historically has thrived on, you know, shame and guilt too, I think it's easy to there's group pressure not to reveal the secrets of the past.
I mean, it's an exceedingly condescending point of view to sit there in judgment of what other people can handle. And it's just a distrust that people have, you know, an ounce of intelligence and to be able to mentally process something on their own, you know. God forbid. I mean, we let people do that on their own as adults.
You're right, transparency is something we see as a value, but not all groups see it as having a value.
Well, which gets, you know, we can maybe draw this to a close. So much of government, so much of institutional management is about managing and making things happen in the smoothest, easiest, most expeditable way. And transparency makes things much harder. And you know, when citizens have to endure 100 lawsuits that reveal who was behind all the abuse, yeah, it's going to cause some problems. So it's easier to put it in a black box, put it on a shelf, and say it's solved. It's done. Yeah, trust me.
But I think it's important to continue to report what we have to go through to get information.
Awesome. Every time.
Yeah. Feds, you cannot get an email from a federal agency. I was told by a VA guy that if he emailed me, he would get fired. And then in the health service, I had to submit questions. So my questions had to be submitted in writing to Washington so that they could be answered in Fort.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's the hallmark of this administration. It's
right.
gotten much worse in the 8 years of the Bush administration.
In this day and age, you cannot email. They cannot email outside of their agency.
Okay.
I think Tom's onto something. We just need to tie everything to gas prices. Rising gas prices may or may not have been a factor in the latest police meeting. There's your lead.
That's why they didn't call for medical backup, because those
they were
ambulances use
concerned.
freemium.
Yeah.